Welcome to another episode of the Power Within podcast. I'm your host, Laurie. Today, I'm so thrilled to have Cathey Cohn on the podcast. Cathey is an incredible woman, and I have learned so much from the writing that she has shared. And I asked her to come on and be a guest, and she was wonderful and agreed to come on. So we had a really good conversation, and she shared about her passion for writing, her travel adventures, things that she learned that were really inspiring to hear about. She has such a passion for her family and a love for them. And it's so beautiful to see. And I love how she shares with the world with her creative process. I have learned so much from her, reading her work and her poetry and what she shares. It really, for me, I have learned to go in and look at different perspectives of my life, the way that I view different things, and to look at new things that maybe I didn't consider before. So I'm really appreciative of her for sharing her gifts in that way so that I was able to, or I have been able to grow more myself. So I'm really happy to share this podcast episode with you guys. I do have a podcast guest playlist, and that is on Spotify. And I ask all my guests to share some songs, kind of just get a feel for the guest and what they like from music and what inspires them, or, how they're feeling when I ask them that, and they share some songs. So I add them in, and Cathey was wonderful. And she shared some great songs that I put into the playlist. So all of that'll be in the show notes as well. If you want to check out the podcast guest playlist for that, I have all the links for all of the things that Cathey talks about in the show notes as well. So please check that out. And I hope that you guys really enjoy this conversation. And I hope that you're as inspired by Cathey as I am. So without further ado, I hope you guys enjoy this episode. Hello, and welcome to the Power Within podcast. Today, I'm so thrilled to have Cathey Cohn on the show. Cathey, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
I love you have a Substack, and it is the Footnotes from the Flip Side. You are incredibly talented with writing, and I want to talk a bit about this first. So I want to ask you, where does your passion come for writing?
So it started when I was really young. I learned to read really young, and I read a lot of adventure books, and I got to the place fairly quickly that I wanted to start writing my own adventures. So I started writing short stories when I was in elementary school. And then it kind of progressed to poetry when I was in junior high. And then I was so passionate about writing being my thing that I just pursued every class I could take, every opportunity that came up that had to do with writing. I got involved in that. And so it just grew and grew. And I was determined that I was going to be a great journalist one day. So I chose a university that had a great journalism school, and then life happened and plans changed, but the passion for writing has always been there.
Now, what has been the most beneficial thing for you that you've learned from this journey of writing?
I would say that to be able to express yourself openly and artistically is probably one of the healthiest things that you can do for yourself. And even if you never share it with anyone, it's still just your being able to put it into words and process life. So I think that's the best thing that it's done for me.
Wonderful. Yeah. And I love, so you don't just write, like you write beautiful poetry on there, but you also showcase other people who have writings and stuff. You also have written about some really important topics. And I want to talk about this a little bit. So I'm going to start with first, when you're showcasing other people's writings and doing that, how has that been like for you to discover other people's writing and how that's impacted you in your life and that want to share their work as well with the world?
I'm an avid learner, and I always have a million questions about everything. So I'm always reading and looking for answers in what other people have already discovered. So I read a lot, and I listen to a lot of podcasts, and all of those things, I think, help me discover more about myself in the process. So then I want to share that with others. If it was helpful to me, it's like, oh, maybe this could help, a number of other people with things that they're going through.
One of the things, actually, there's two pieces that you had done that I was really blown away with. And one of them was your Try a Little Kindness writing. That one I thought was so beautiful because before you did the poem, you talked about how a lot of people put limitations on kindness unless they're comfortable with the recipient. And this really struck me because I sat and thought for a while and I was like, wow, I do notice that I'm kind of more kind to people that I think are worthy of that kindness. And so I want to ask your thought process when you were writing that piece. What made you go, okay, this is something I want to share, and I want this to inspire other people to think about this in their own life and how they can make changes?
I had actually seen a story, I think it was on CBS Sunday Morning, about a woman who had been homeless and lived for years that way. And finally, somebody came along and recognized that was not her desire, that was not her intention to live on the streets. Just life had handed her these difficult circumstances and she had had nowhere to go. And so when I saw that, I started thinking about the homeless people that I see all around me all the time. And maybe it's not their choice to live that way. And maybe they're just looking for someone to give them a lift up, um, to get out of the life that they don't really want to be in. So that kind of prompted that whole writing about me thinking more about those types of people, and am I withholding kindness from someone who really all they need is a leg up? And if I am kind to someone who wants to live that way, then it doesn't do me any harm to at least be kind to them. So that's kind of where that came from.
And I kind of like this. You just touched on it a little bit because something that I found on myself, and this is something I'm exploring on the podcast this year, is sometimes when you withhold your kindness or you look at people a certain way, it's because of a judgment. And so for you, how has it been to look and say, okay, I can see where I judge people? Or is the process easier for you now to go, okay, no, I know right away that's a judgment and I need to not do that? Was that easier for you when you were working on this writing to be able to spot?
It made me think about what judgment really is. And I started thinking about, am I judging the person or am I judging their behavior? And so I want to be careful that I judge the behavior or the situation and not the person as such. So it has made me think about that a lot when I approach someone who I don't necessarily approve of how they're living or of their behavior. I have to remember that they are a person behaving a certain way, and I can judge the behavior, but I have to love the person.
I love that. That's really a great way to kind of look at it. And I know, you know, in the world right now, it's very hard to sometimes be involved and see the way that things go on and go, okay, I know that this is a judgment. And I know for myself, I've had a lot of with social media sometimes like there comes a lot of judgment, and that's something that I struggled with. And even myself, I've done so much growth, but I could remember times when I'd be like, oh, I don't like that person because of this, and it was petty frivolous things, and then it came back around on me and I'm like, well, wait, how come that person doesn't like me? Or and it's, I think it's really important. And I love where you said it was part of like your self growth too. So I want to ask you a little bit about self growth and how that has impacted you. So when you look at like how you used to be and then look at yourself now, what kind of changes do you see for yourself when you do that? And how hard was it for you to shift those changes?
Hmm. I think probably when I quit my job 3 years ago, I got a lot more introspective about priorities, about what was important to me, about how I had just been on this path of doing what I thought I needed to do and not not thinking too much about life or myself. And so when I quit my job, I was suddenly in some state of relief and panic at the same time of, okay, now what? And so that's when I really felt like I was getting repeated messages about go back to your writing, because then you'll be able to pull out those feelings, those ways that you want to change. And certain people really put me on the path of look at this, consider this. Is this something about yourself that you don't like? And how can you change it? Or is this something that you're really good at and you can expand on that? So it's been a process, and I just feel like it's not done. I think I still have more to learn and more ways to grow, and I'm just open to them now that maybe I wasn't before.
Well, I love your stepping out of your comfort zone and doing those different things because I think that's where we kind of find, the parts of ourselves that are the most worth living in doing that. And I know that you had mentioned in one of your pieces of writing that you are working on doing your own poetry book. So I want to ask you a little bit about that and the process for you. What have you found most challenging when you're picking out your writings that you want to include or working on trying to get your book going? And what, so far in the process, what have you found to be most rewarding?
Well, thanks for bringing that up. I need all the self promotion I can get. Um, it was a lot more difficult than I thought it was going to be. I thought it would be easy to just, oh, here's all my poems, and I'll just put them together and put pretty pictures with them that I had taken and that sort of thing. But when I got into it, I realized that I really wanted there to be a message with it, that it needed to be something that wasn't just, oh, read these poems and hope you like them, but that it would take people on a journey that I went through. And so my book is going back, clear back to when I started writing poetry, and then how it progressed over time and where it is now and what that journey has been like. And hopefully it will help people grow in their own way as they read the whole book.
That's amazing. I can't wait to read it. I know it's going to be wonderful. And you do, when you were just saying, talking about important things, I do want to touch back on, there was a piece of writing that you did, and I think it's really important to highlight things, even things that aren't as, comfortable or exciting in the world. And you had a piece of writing on your page for, it was called The Highway of Tears. And
Mm.
you shared about you had watched the movie Wind River. And I went and watched that movie. And at the end of that movie, there comes up the screen at the end, and it says, how like in crimes against Indigenous women are not the statistics are not gathered for that. And then I know that you wrote that you read that book, and then you had written a poem about that. And that was really touching. And I went back and I was, I started digging in and doing some research. I know I looked at Brett and Cecilia Kissel they had talked about some of the things with the Indigenous people and the graveyards and things like that they had found, and how important that was. So I wanted to ask you, what about that story really were you like, I this is something I have to highlight?
It's interesting how those things come to me because as I said, I read a lot. I know a lot of what's going on in the world, but sometimes there's just that thing that hits you right in the heart. And I thought, there's a lot of issues in this country over racism, over equality, and nobody's bringing light to this issue. It's just a pretty new topic for people to look at. And so I thought, this has been going on for a really long time, and nobody has paid attention really, or tried to make change or to try and figure it out. So then I began doing the research, and the more I read, it was just this idea that these people have been shoved aside and overlooked and told that their loved ones that are gone were not that important because perhaps they lived a lifestyle that most of us don't approve of. And so it just became something that I couldn't rest until I told the story. And that's how it comes to me sometimes. I'll just encounter a story and it won't leave me alone until I write it.
I think that that's incredible, and I think it's really important to when you're being creative, highlight those things because you know a lot of times it's easy to brush on to just like the happy topic. So I think that was really great, and I actually learned a lot from that piece, and it made me start to dig in and do stuff. So thank you because you taught me something by reading that.
Cool.
Now, speaking of teaching and learning, I know that you're a mom and I know that you're a grandmom. And I want to ask for you, what what have you learned? What's the most important thing that you've learned from being a mom and from being a grandmother? And what are the things that you hope that your kids and your grandkids will carry on into the future that they've learned from you?
That's a tough one. I think one of the things that I've learned from being a mom is that you hope your kids embrace the things that you believe or the choices that you would make for them, but they're their own people. And if you're doing a good job as a parent, you're encouraging that. You want them to be their own people and to come to their own belief system and their own way of doing things, and still loving them even if you disagree with that. So I think acceptance, and helping them to follow the path that's important to them and their passions and the things that mean a lot to them. So giving them that freedom and still instilling in them the things that you hope they embrace, but they may or may not, I think is a delicate balance.
Yeah, it's fun, and I always like to ask people like, what is that you want them to learn, and what do you take away? And I had the opportunity to meet you and your husband in the summer and or early fall, and one of the things that I loved right away is how warm and fun you guys were. And it actually struck me because I'm like, wow, they're like really fun. You guys were laughing and joking, and I was like, I really like that because it's that you have that kind of fun personality where people want to be around you. So I was like, I want to make sure that I ask because I get the feeling that you guys are fun grandparents to the grandkids. And I know that you love to travel too, and you have your RV that you guys travel in. So I want to ask, do
Yeah.
you do trips with your grandkids and those and your kids, or have you just done so far with you and your husband and your friends?
We've done different combinations of things. Sometimes we've taken one of our kids and their whole family, but it gets a little crowded in the camper. But every summer we have four grandkids, and every summer we give each of them a trip in the RV, and they can choose to go by themselves or they can take a cousin or whatever. So yeah, we get them in there and we take them and show them the world a little bit because we do love to travel, and I want to instill that in them too, that there's a lot to see out there. And so yeah, so we do that every year. We're already planning this summer for each of them to have their little trip.
That's amazing. I love that. So when on your travels, has there been something that you have done, whether it's with one of your grandkids or just on your solo travels? Has there been a part of, I'll start with your RVing, that you've been like, wow, I grew a lot learning from this experience?
So a trip that we took recently was the one that we met you last September. I think it was early September, where a friend that we both know came from Australia, and we took her in the RV. Her bucket list item was to see Canada. And I had known her for quite a while at that point, and I finally just said, "We live 3 hours from the border. If you can get to us, we can get you to Canada." So that was an adventure because I had never met her before. And, you don't know somebody's likes and dislikes and how they travel and all of that. But it was an amazing experience to share that trip for 3 weeks across Canada with someone I had never met. And it was wonderful. I learned that, we can just be flexible and change plans at the last minute if there's something that comes up that person wants to do. So for me, it was really important on that trip that she have the experience that she had been dreaming of. And so we kind of just, she told us what she wanted to see and do, and we kind of just adapted the trip that way. And then a couple of opportunities came up, like the book signing birthday gathering. That was just like a bonus. I felt like that was almost divine intervention for that to happen, because we hadn't planned to go there for that at all. It just came up. So yeah, that was an amazing experience to share that with her.
I love when you were just talking about how, like, you made it like about her and then you guys mix stuff in. So when you do plan your trips, how much of it is like spontaneity and how much of it is planned out?
It depends on who we go with, of course. But if it's just Keith and I, we do plan where you want to be when, so that you have a campsite and all of that. But then our favorite thing to do is just go park somewhere for a few days and explore the area. So that can look like a lot of different things. Some opportunity may come up that you didn't even know existed in one of the places that you're visiting. So there's a mixture of planning and quite a bit of spontaneity too.
What is your favorite trip that you've done in the RV with your husband since you got it outside of the one that you just did this
Yeah.
summer?
I would say probably anything on the Oregon coast. We both love it there. And so anytime we get a chance to go back there and visit the beaches and hang out, in the little coastal towns, that's probably some of our favorite.
Now you are from the Pacific Northwest and oh, it's so beautiful. And I
I do
want to
love it.
ask because it's an incredible, diverse nature area. And I want to ask, I'm a big nature person and I feel like it's very important for growth. I feel like it's very important for self.
Mm.
What do you find benefits you the most when you're out in nature? And what is something that you've learned about watching nature and watching the animals that I know that you love to take photos of as well?
I do. So I've kind of gotten into the photography because I wanted my own pictures to put with my writing. So it was kind of as simple as that. But when we go, we definitely want to go visit um, forests and mountains and that amazing scenery that's out there, because when you're in it, you just get perspective, I think, about life, because you're just one little cog in this giant wheel that works so amazingly well together. I see it as creation, and that it's um, a perfect unit of animals and plants and sky and weather and all of those things that influence us in. And if you get out in it, it really, to me, grows you as a person. You get that perspective of, it's so big and there's so much to see, and there's so much we can learn by watching deer and birds and how they interact, that help us as people too, I think.
Do you have a moment in nature where you were like, wow, because I know that you are a faith-based spiritual person and I know God's important in your life. Like has there ever been a moment where you were just out in nature, whether it's by yourself or with someone else, and you were like, this is unbelievable, that you can
Yeah, there have
remember?
been a lot of them. Probably the one I remember most clearly was when I was thinking about quitting my job, and Keith and I went to the Oregon coast, and we went to a beach that we had never been to before, which is rare because we've been on the coast a lot. But we went to this beach. It was a beautiful sunny day, and he sat down on a log, and I just walked the beach. And I'm watching the waves roll in, and I honestly felt like God spoke to my heart and said, I have a timeline for you, and it's not the one you're keeping right now. So when are you going to do what you need to do? So that was profound for me, because I felt God was right there on the beach at the ocean giving me this message that I needed to move forward. And so then I went home immediately, wrote my letter of resignation, because I figured if God said it to me, I really should listen.
And what does that feel like for you when you're in that moment and you can feel God? What is that feeling for Cathey?
It's interesting. It's not like I've ever really heard the voice of God audibly. It's like this strong impression. And I believe it's the Holy Spirit that just whispers and says, it's not like hitting me over the head, although I need that sometimes too. But mostly it's just this strong impression that I need to listen and act on what I'm hearing. And so I try to spend a little bit of time every day. We have a small deck off of our bedroom that's right in the trees. And I try to go out there almost every day and just get quiet and see if there's something that I need to be hearing and listening to. Maybe it's just listening to the birds that day. But then I feel like I'm giving God the opportunity to tell me what he wants me to know.
I always find it really fascinating. Jen Lilly, when she came on, she was talking about with God. It was kind of similar, like when you were just saying, like you kind of feel it. And she had said there was a role that she was looking at, and she was like, she's like, I felt it like audible, and it was like, this is your role. And she's like, I knew right away. She's like, I knew right away that feeling. So when you were just talking about that, it kind of gave me goosebumps because it brought that up, and I was like, wow, that's really powerful. And so with your faith, like how important to you is that above all else? Is that your guidance for everything? Or yeah,
Mhm.
okay.
It is my guidance system because my faith is such that I trust in the God of the universe, that he knows best, regardless of what I'm going to go through. And so he may decide that I'm going to go through something really hard, but there's something in it that's good. So in the end, I will have learned something or grown in some way, even if that situation was painful and hard. So I do trust um, God to direct me, to guide me into whatever that looks like. And yet sometimes I feel like he just sets up a series of paths or crossroads that I can take any of them. And he'll say, okay, you chose this. I'm going to walk with you there. And we're going to learn what you need to learn in this. And then maybe we'll go back and take a different one. But there is that freedom of that free will of me choosing, and yet him not saying, well, you chose that. I'm not going to be with you if that's the choice you make. So I trust in all the choices that he's always there and guiding.
Now, when you're going through a challenging time in your life, though, do you, I know that you said that you trust in God and you trust that that's the path that you're supposed to go on, and you know that. Do you ever find yourself, though, in moments where you're like, where you get stuck? And is it that kind of faith where you're like, no, I know, or how do you work out that? Because everyone has those challenging moments where, their faith is tested, or they're like, they can sit to choose and sit in it for longer than they need to. How do you work out when you're in a challenging situation?
I think I do take time. Sometimes if it's not clear right away, it's like, well, I guess waiting is the process right now. And so sometimes I'll wait. And sometimes a situation will require you to make a decision. But when you step into it, then you begin to see a path or a direction to take. So sometimes it is waiting. And that's frustrating when you need to make a decision or want to know what's coming or decide on something, for God to say, no, you need to wait a little longer. This isn't ready yet for you. So waiting is hard. I'm not a patient person at all. That is one of my weaknesses. But I think maybe that's sometimes why he makes me wait.
Patience is a virtue.
Right? I don't have it.
I think sometimes, I'm like that too. I can be a little bit impatient, especially with traffic. And I'm like, yeah, okay. Someone's telling me I need to just slow down a little bit. And, so it's very interesting to hear how people, kind of view that and how they accept those challenges in their life. Because I think that there is a balance to that. I when you accept the challenges, I think it becomes easier and easier as you work through them to be able to see those, golden moments or those other things that are, the light, things that are in your life that are good. So I really appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah, sometimes you don't see it until you look back. You know what I mean? You go through it, and then you're able to look back and say, oh, now I know what that was about. Now I know why I was supposed to wait, or now I know why I wasn't supposed to go that way. It's not always evident in the moment.
Do you ever find yourself when you just were talking about like when you look back and you see, do you ever go, I wonder what it would be like if I went that path? Or are you just like, no, I
Sure.
knew which path I was going and this is what it was?
Yeah, I mean, there are always, I don't live in regret or I don't live in the, oh, maybe it could have been different. I just am curious about it. It's like, oh, what if I had not gone to university and met my husband? What if I, had gone on to be that journalist? What would that look like? So I'm curious about it, but I don't live in that, oh, I wish I had sort of stage.
And speaking of your husband there, what has been something, because you guys have been together for a long time, what has been something that you've learned from your husband that you think has, I mean, I'm sure that there's many moments that you're like, I'm so grateful for him. But has there ever been a moment with your husband where you're like, I'm so grateful for this and I just learned something like incredible that helped me grow or expand? Or do you have any other those moments?
Oh, yeah, probably lots of them. He approaches life so differently than I do. And I think one of the things that he's taught me is to relax and enjoy it. I'm a type A, get things done, spot on, all of that, and he is the procrastinator, the exact opposite of me in many ways. But he's taught me to relax in it a little bit and just enjoy the moment right now. And if something doesn't get done, it's not the end of the world. So yeah, that's kind of how he approaches life. And so I've over the years, it's been 40 some years now, I've learned to relax a little and laugh a lot because he always makes me laugh.
And I was just going to bring up that point, fun, like having fun in life, where you were saying,
Yeah.
you were very like type A, and how important has it been for you to learn that, what, sometimes you just have to have like a lot of fun and don't take life so seriously.
Yeah. I think it's been super important for me because as you get older, you have less time to think about. And so you want to make every day count. You want every day to have some fun in it and appreciate all the moments that you have. So it's been really important for me to figure that out. Relax and enjoy the process because you have limited time. And so, are you going to be uptight for the rest of your life, or are you going to relax and embrace it? So, I've learned, thanks to him, I've learned to have a lot more fun and not be quite as uptight.
And you travel a lot too. And I know you just went to Belize. And so
Hmm.
for you, I think something that I learned, I know that you travel with your husband. I've learned through solo traveling so much about myself, and it's so interesting when you get into like different areas to learn, when you do get into different situations, you learn a lot about yourself. So I want to know, when you have traveled and you've gone to other places, what have you learned about yourself?
Well, the trip to Belize was completely eye opening for me because it's a third world country and yet it's a tourist spot. So you get there and you're on the beaches and the beautiful rainforest and all of that. And until you get into the mainland and the villages, you don't realize that people live in homes with dirt floors and no doors. And so for me, that was a huge learning experience. I came home and went, oh my word, I have so much stuff. I feel like I should give it away. It just gives you perspective on how other people live in the world in a way that you can't read about. You have to be there and see it and feel it. And these people who basically had nothing were the most warm, generous people that I've ever met. This one family had us in for lunch and gave us chicken. We had chicken from, and I have to laugh because I'm looking around, I'm seeing all these chickens going, oh, whose friend didn't make it today? Because, they just grow their own food and they eat what they have. And so I was so grateful for that experience of seeing how other people live. And yet they're so happy and satisfied and kind and generous. And so that reminded me that sometimes having a lot isn't all it's cracked up to be.
I think this is a really beautiful example. I had another friend who went and visited some world, and she's like, it was very interesting to see people have nothing, but she's like, they're happier than those of us in the United
Mm,
States who are just hoarding and getting material items and, having all of those things. And I think sometimes we equate, what we have and how much we have to our happiness. And I know even in my own travels, this summer and doing things, I realized how minimally I could live and how much happier I was without a lot of things
mm,
surrounding me. And so I love that you just brought this up. And I love that story where you shared, they open up their homes. And because I feel like in a lot of like different cultures, especially when you go where it's not, the people living there are not really wealthy. I had taken a trip before and, they were like, can we braid your hair? And we just want to, just like $1. And,
mm,
and I watched and they made these beautiful, beautiful things. And I was gifted some beautiful things in Jamaica and the Cayman Islands when I had gone
mm.
there. And the people were so warm. And I love that because they don't have much, but they have more than a lot of people do because the things that they have are in their hearts. And I think
Mhm.
that that's so important to remember that happiness doesn't come from the things that you surround yourself with because at the end of the day, you
Yeah.
ain't taking none of it with you in the end. So make those memories and make those, those experiences matter more than material items.
Yeah. 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 And don't get me wrong, I'm grateful that I live where I live and that I've been blessed in many ways. But to get out there and see what other people can be happy with, and it's not all of this, um, that's pretty life changing. I mean, it makes you think every day, do I really need that thing? Or could I share that thing? Or could I help in some way with these people who have nothing? So it does change your perspective.
In spending time there, did you notice that yourself, like where you felt being surrounded by less, but more because you had great company and you were having a good time? Did you feel more fulfilled yourself than being surrounded by lots of things?
I don't think that really hit me until I got home. In the moment, I was just kind of amazed by it all. And I kept wondering what they were thinking about us as Americans coming in who have so much. Did they feel like I was going to be generous with them and kind to them? And so I really tried to be that. We left a lot of big tips because, a couple American dollars means so much to them. Um, and so in the moment, I didn't have time for it to really sink in and feel fulfilled. It just gave me the drive to help more people as much as I can whenever I can.
And so that's something you've taken away now that you've come back home, that you
Yeah,
want to do more of that. Now, is that when you're
definitely.
planning like wanting to do travels or be more active in your community or things like that? How much of a role of that, I want to get those experiences and give those experiences to other people plays into that?
I think that's huge. You're probably going to laugh, but Keith and I didn't even have our passports until this year when we went to Belize. So we haven't experienced a lot of other cultures, other countries type of thing. And I don't know how much more we will be able to do that. But what it made me realize is that giving of yourself is one thing, but I want to be able to write about it. I know that if I get out there and meet people, I'm going to have stories to tell that will hopefully not just influence me, but influence a whole audience of people to be kinder, to be more generous. So that's what I'm hoping. If I get out there more, there'll be stories that rise to the top that I can tell.
Now, when you were, I know you talked about how photography is something that you've taken up to because you want that in your own books. And I was curious as you were talking about this, I was like, I would love to read like a book with experiences that you had in Belize with photographs of different things that you guys did. Have you thought about doing like a smaller book for that travel and kind of
I'm
sharing
still
that
I'm
experience?
still working I'm still working on my Canada book. And since I'm doing my own poetry book now, yes, I would love to. I just don't know when. But yeah, I would love to put together a book. And then if anybody wants to read it, fine. It'll be mostly for us. But yeah, I would love to tell some of the stories. And the people are just amazing to me. So we met a bunch of students who in Belize, education is only free through age 12. And then after that, you have to pay to go to school. So if you're a family and you're choosing whether to feed your family or send your child to school, the child doesn't go to school. So part of what we were experiencing and getting to know is that there's an organization there that sponsors kids to go to high school and even college if they want to break that generational pattern of poverty. So if I were to do a book, I would want to include some of that, how this generational poverty can be broken through these students one at a time.
That's amazing. I actually would love if you have information on that too, to include
I'll
in the
send
show
it
notes so
away.
people can check that out as well, because I think that that's really important. And I think giving back to different areas that have taught you and learned, like you went and learned things from, is so important. So I absolutely love that.
Okay.
That's fantastic. And something I'd like to ask you too is how do you, because you are so busy, you've got your husband and your kids and your grandkids and you got travel and you're writing and you're very supportive of other people online and their creations. How do you find so much time? Or how do you
I
manage
don't
your
know.
time, I should say?
Sometimes I don't do it very well. Sometimes now that I'm retired, I have really lazy mornings and I don't get around to stuff until noon. But you just have to prioritize your days and say, okay, well, I have a lot of flexibility today, but what should be the number one thing? And I always try to leave myself open if somebody hits me up and asks me for help with something, because I'm a natural helper. And so if somebody hits me up and says, will you read this? Or will you help me write this poem? Or will you help me get on Substack? I want to be available to do that for people. So that just comes up and I kind of drop whatever I'm doing generally and jump into that. But yeah, it's a busy life, but I want it to be a busy life. I want my retirement years to be fulfilling. So I try to be involved in a lot.
That's amazing. I love that. I've loved talking to you. This has been so much fun. I would love to ask you to, I know I'd asked if you would read one of your poems. So I was wondering if you have one to share, if you'd be willing to share it. And then tell us a little
I
bit about
do.
it.
Okay. Yeah, you asked me to pick a favorite, and I couldn't because I have so many poems that go back so long. But I picked one that kind of means a lot to me because relationships are so important to me. And I think relationships are also easy to break or damage. And so this poem I wrote when I was in a little bit of a relationship struggle with a friend, and I encountered a picture of a butterfly with broken wings. And so the name of this is called Broken Things. You can't repair some broken things, like butterflies with shattered wings, like a flower with a splintered stem, like unforgiveness in a friend. There is no glue to fix some breaks or tape to cover certain mistakes. So be gentle as you tread through days. Walk softly as you make your way. Don't leave a trail of destruction behind. Some precious things can't be redesigned.
That's beautiful. That's so beautiful.
Thank you.
And if like I would love to ask you because you are so great with words and you are so good with writing. If anyone wanted to get into writing, what would your suggestion be for them?
I think the first thing is reading a lot. Go read poetry, go read short essays, read blogs, listen to podcasts, because then it gives you somewhere to start. And my way to start writing is generally just to be engaged in what's going on in the world. And sometimes inspiration will come to me in the oddest places. So I try to carry something with me to write, because if I don't write them down, I'll forget. But just look at life always with an eye on, what could I say about this? What does this feel like, and how can I express it? And, a lot of people get intimidated by trying to write a poem, that it has to rhyme or it has to, have a certain look to it. But if you just start writing thoughts down, sometimes you have a poem. And if you never even share it, it's a blessing to you to be able to express that way in words. And then it gets better. The more you do it, the more practice, the more it comes. So that's what I recommend to people, is just start writing down your thoughts, and you'll be amazed at what comes up.
That's amazing. And if people want to find you, where is the best place to find you and contact you?
Okay, well, I'm on most of the social media sites because I use them for promotion. So I'm on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, Threads, Time Has Come, and Substack. Substack is where you're going to find my writing, and it's just catheycone.substack.com. And you can read all the blog posts and poetry there.
They're amazing. So everyone needs to go check them out and subscribe to her writing. It's wonderful.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for coming on, Cathey. I appreciate you so much.
Thanks for having me. This was a lot of fun.
Thank you.